The ventilator hissed like a metronome, counting down the seconds Noah Ferreira had left to make sense of the impossible. Her ex-husband standing at the foot of her ICU bed, latex gloves snapping against his wrists, reading vitals as if the last 3 years had dissolved into the antiseptic air. She couldn't speak. The endotracheal tube made sure of that. But her eyes tracked him across the sterile white room, past the IV poles dripping crystalloid at 120 milliliters per hour, past the cardiac monitor tracing her fury in sharp green peaks. 2 million readers followed her investigative pieces on corruption and foreign aid logistics. She'd survived 14 countries and twice as many close calls. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was the clause buried in her emergency contact form. Next of kin signed 4 years ago, never updated, and the fact that Dr. Adrian Klein, critical care chief at Providence Metro, held her life in his competent, careful hands. The hands she'd left because they'd begged her to stop chasing danger. Now danger had found her anyway, and he was the only one who could pull her back. The ICU smelled like iodine and recycled air, a windowless warren of 12 beds separated by pale blue curtains that never quite closed all the way. Machines beeped in overlapping rhythms, oxygen saturations, arterial lines, feeding pumps, a symphony of survival that never stopped. Noah had visited ICUs before for stories: a nurse union strike in Chicago, a hepatitis outbreak in Portland. She'd always walked out. Now she was bolted to the bed by a central line in her neck, arterial catheter in her wrist, Foley catheter she refused to think about, and restraints, soft cloth restraints, the nurse had explained gently, because sedated patients sometimes pulled at tubes. The ceiling tiles had water stains in the corner. She counted them. 7, shaped like a lopsided continent. Her laptop was 3,000 miles away in a hotel in Nairobi. Her editor, Marcus, thought she was filing a follow-up on misallocated grain shipments. Her lungs had other plans. They'd filled with fluid somewhere over the Atlantic, turned her into a liability before the plane even touched down at Logan. Adrian rounded at 6:30 in the morning. She knew because the wall clock, industrial and brutally honest, sat directly in her sightline. He came with an entourage, a resident with circles under her eyes, a pharmacist clutching a tablet, and a respiratory therapist named Yuki who adjusted the ventilator settings with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 10,000 times. Adrian didn't look at Noah. He looked at her chart. Acute respiratory distress syndrome secondary to aspiration pneumonia, likely from in-flight emesis during viral prodrome. Chest X-ray shows bilateral infiltrates. Latest ABG shows pH 7.32, CO2 51, still compensating. We'll keep her on assist control, PEEP at 10, FiO2 at 60%. Sedation holiday at noon if she tolerates. The resident scribbled notes. Yuki nodded. The pharmacist suggested adding stress dose steroids. Adrian paused, finally met Noah's eyes for half a second, then said, "Agreed," and paged Dr. Lorna Chen from Pulmonary for co-management. "I want a second attending." The resident's pen froze. "Sir, you're the chief." "I'm also," Adrian said, voice flat. "Her ex-husband. Document that. Transparency protocol. Dr. Chen takes lead on all major decisions. I'm supervisory only." The room went silent except for the ventilator. Noah's heart rate jumped to 108. Adrian turned and left, white coat disappearing through the automatic doors, and she was alone with strangers who now knew exactly why her next-of-kin contact had never been changed. Dr. Lorna Chen arrived 2 hours later, a woman in her 50s with silver streaks in her black hair and a no-nonsense cadence that reminded Noah of her grandmother. She pulled a rolling stool to the bedside and sat at eye level, the first person all morning who'd done that. "Miss Ferreira, you're awake enough to follow commands, correct?" Noah blinked twice. Yes, Yuki had taught her that. "Good. You're intubated and critically ill, but your neurostatus is intact. I've been briefed by Dr. Klein on the complicated history. Here's what's happening. I'm your primary decision maker for your care. He's supervisory and available for consultation, but he doesn't write orders for sedation, extubation, or code status. That's me. If you need him removed from your care team entirely, blink 3 times now." Noah blinked once. "No." Chen studied her. "You trust him clinically?" 1 blink. "Yes." But you need boundaries. One blink. Chen made a note on her tablet. Fair, here's the arrangement. He rounds with the team, participates in discussions, but I sign everything. All communication about your condition goes through me to your emergency contact. Looks like that's your brother in Lisbon, Thomas Ferreira. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, we have a safe phrase system. When you're extubated and can talk, say, I need a weather check, and we'll remove Dr. Klein from the room immediately. No questions asked. Chen pulled a laminated card from her pocket and placed it on the bedside table where Noah could see it. Weather check protocol. Patient request for space. This stays here. Nursing staff knows it. You're not trapped, Miss Ferreira. You're sick, but you're not trapped. For the first time since waking, Noah felt her chest unclench, metaphorically, because literally, her chest was still a disaster. On day 3, Noah's brother Thomas flew in from Portugal, a wiry man with the same sharp cheekbones and stubborn jawline, and immediately started interrogating the nursing staff about every medication, every vital sign trend, every milliliter of urine output. The day nurse, a calm Jamaican woman named Paulette, fielded his questions with saint-like patience until Thomas discovered the consent form for a bronchoscopy, scheduled for that afternoon. She can't consent to this, he said, voice rising. She's sedated. Her surrogate decision-maker consented, Paulette said. Dr. Chen. And who is Dr. Chen? Where is... Adrian stepped into the room, not in a white coat this time, but in navy scrubs, clearly just out of a procedure. You're Thomas. Not a question. Thomas turned, sizing him up. I know who you are. Good. Then you know I'm not making decisions here, but I can explain the bronchoscopy if Dr. Chen's caught in another case. Your sister has mucus plugging in her right lower lobe. We need to clear it or she'll develop secondary infection and we'll lose ground. It's a 15-minute procedure, moderate sedation, low risk. Dr. Chen assessed her this morning and deemed it necessary. I'll be in the room because I'm the attending on service, but interventional pulmonary is doing the scope. Your sister will be monitored the entire time. Tomas crossed his arms. And if I say no? Then Dr. Chen will call you directly and explain why that's a bad idea, and we'll lose 2 hours we don't have. Adrian's voice was even, clinical, but there was something underneath it. Fatigue, maybe, or restraint. Your sister's oxygen requirement went up overnight. We're trying to get her extubated by the end of the week. This helps. Thomas looked at Noah. She blinked once. Yes. He exhaled, shoulders dropping. Fine, but I'm staying in the room. You can watch from the observation window, Adrian said. That's policy. Tomas nodded, grudging, and as Adrian left, he muttered something in Portuguese that Noah was grateful no one translated. But the bronchoscopy happened, the mucus plug cleared, and by that evening her oxygen saturation climbed to 94%. Small victories. Day 5 brought a new complication. The hospital's public relations coordinator, a young man named Brendan with an aggressively cheerful tie, appeared outside Noah's room with a tablet and a concerned expression. Paulette intercepted him at the door. Family only. I'm not family, I'm communications. We received a media inquiry, someone from The Guardian asking if journalist Noah Ferreira is a patient here. They're running a story about her investigation into the grain shipment fraud, and they want a statement about her condition. Paulette's face hardened. HIPAA says we confirm nothing. They already know she's here. They have a source. Adrian, passing by with a coffee that smelled like burned desperation, stopped. What's the inquiry? Brendan hesitated, glancing at Noah through the glass door. They want to know if her illness is connected to her work. If she was targeted. The word hung in the air like a grenade. Noah's heart rate spiked, 112, 118. The monitor alarm chimed. Adrian stepped into the room, checked the monitor, looked at Noah. You're safe here, he said quietly. But we need to know. Is there any reason to believe your respiratory failure was anything other than medical? Noah blinked twice. No, it wasn't foul play. Just bad luck, bad timing, a virus that hit at 35,000 feet. Adrian turned to Brendan. Then the statement is, Providence Metro does not comment on patient status. Any questions about Miss Ferreira's work should be directed to her publisher. Nothing more. Brendan nodded and left. Paulette adjusted Noah's IV, muttering, "Reporters," with a mix of exasperation and pity, but Adrian stayed an extra moment, and Noah noticed for the first time what he'd carried into the room every single morning. A small brass compass, tarnished and old, that he set on the counter beside the sink whenever he washed his hands. He'd carried it through med school, she remembered. A gift from his grandfather. True north, he used to say when life got chaotic. Find true north. She'd forgotten. Apparently, he hadn't. The extubation happened on day 7, a choreographed event involving Yuki, Dr. Chen, Adrian, the resident, and a crash cart parked outside just in case. Chen explained each step as they deflated the cuff, suctioned the tube, and told Noah to cough on 3. The tube slid out and Noah gasped, raw throat, burning lungs, but air, her own air. They placed a high-flow nasal cannula immediately, oxygen hissing at 40 liters per minute, but it was hers. "Don't talk yet," Chen said. "Your vocal cords are swollen. Give it an hour." But an hour later, when Paulette brought ice chips and a whiteboard for communication, Noah croaked out her first question. "How long?" 7 days, Adrian answered from the doorway. He'd stayed back during the extubation, supervisory, just like he'd promised. "You were intubated for 7 days. Her voice cracked. "My story. The grain shipment. Your editor knows you're alive. Thomas called him. The story ran without your byline. Someone else finished it." Noah's chest tightened, not from the lungs this time. 3 months of work, handed off like a relay baton she'd dropped. Adrian saw the look. "You almost died, Noah. The story doesn't matter. It always mattered to you that it mattered to me." The words came out sharper than she intended, but they were true. He'd hated her work, hated the risk, hated every time she boarded a plane to somewhere dangerous. That's why she'd left. Chen cleared her throat. "Miss Ferreira, you need rest. We'll talk about rehab and discharge planning tomorrow." But as the room emptied, Noah caught something in the nursing notes Paulette had left on the bedside table. A single line in Adrian's handwriting, dated day 2, the day she'd been most unstable. Patient's brother notified of critical status. Next 72 hours uncertain. Attending to remain on site. He'd stayed. For 3 days he'd stayed in the hospital, even though he wasn't supposed to be her primary anything. Maybe some things did still matter. On day 9, Noah graduated from high-flow oxygen to a simple nasal cannula, and Chen cleared her to sit in the recliner by the window for an hour each afternoon. Physical therapy. A kind woman named Denise, who smelled like lavender hand lotion, came by to help her walk 10 feet to the bathroom. A journey that left Noah's legs shaking and her dignity in shambles. But it was progress. Thomas had flown back to Lisbon for work, promising to return for discharge, and the ICU had fallen into a new rhythm. Morning rounds, breathing treatments, meals she could barely stomach, and the evenings, when the unit quieted and the fluorescent lights dimmed to something almost bearable. Adrian came by after his shift on day 10, still in scrubs, the brass compass in his hand. He set it on the windowsill beside her recliner without asking. "You used to say it kept you honest," Noah said, voice still raspy but stronger. "Still does." He pulled the rolling stool over, sat down with the careful distance of someone who'd learned boundaries the hard way. "I need to tell you something. The night you came in, the EMTs said you'd been alone in your hotel room for approximately 8 hours before housekeeping found you unresponsive. You'd vomited, aspirated, and your oxygen saturation was in the 70s. Another hour, maybe 2, and we wouldn't be having this conversation." Noah looked at the compass, its needle trembling toward magnetic north. "I didn't call anyone. I thought it was just the flu." "You never call anyone. That's the problem." His voice wasn't angry, just tired, worn down by 3 years of wondering if she was alive. "When they brought you in and I saw your name on the board, I thought—" He stopped, rubbed his face. "I thought I'd lost you before I ever got to say I was sorry." The apology hung between them, fragile and overdue. Noah reached for the compass, turned it over. On the back, engraved in letters so small she'd never noticed them before. AK, find your way home. His grandfather's initials. Adrian Klein Sr. You gave me a copy of this once, she said. You lost it in Bogota. I didn't lose it. I left it in the hotel safe and never went back. She met his eyes. Because you told me to choose, the work or you. And I chose. I know. He took the compass back, set it on the windowsill again. I was wrong to make you choose. I was scared and I couldn't handle not knowing if you'd come home. But that doesn't mean you were wrong to go. Day 12 brought a small, strange gift. Dr. Chen appeared during morning rounds with a manila envelope, the kind with a string closure, and handed it to Noah. This came to the hospital addressed to you. Care of ICU. Security screened it. It's safe. Inside was a printed photograph, slightly faded, dated in the corner. October 15th, 3 years ago. The stamp was in blue ink, the kind you'd get from a film developer at a drugstore. The photo showed a train platform at night, somewhere rural, the station sign reading Greenfield Junction. And there, sitting on a bench under a flickering light, was Adrian in jeans and a jacket, holding a paper coffee cup. Noah's breath caught. I don't understand. Adrian, standing at the back of the group, stepped forward. That's the night you were supposed to come back from São Paulo. You texted me from the airport that you were taking a train instead of flying. Something about needing to think. I drove 2 hours to meet you at Greenfield because I thought maybe if I showed up, if I proved I could wait, you'd stay. But you never got off the train. I changed my mind, Noah whispered. I got off at the next stop and took a bus to New York instead. I couldn't face you. I know. I waited until 3 in the morning. The station master, a guy named Harold Baines, brought me coffee and told me if someone doesn't show up, it usually means they already made their choice. Adrian pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a train ticket stub, Amtrak Northeast Regional, October 15th, seat 12A, time stamped 22:45. Harold took that photo. He said he did it for couples sometimes when they were waiting, sent it to me a week later with a note that said, You showed up. That counts for something. The resident and pharmacist exchanged glances. Chen watched quietly. Noah stared at the photo, at the timestamp, at the proof that Adrian had been there, had waited, had tried. Why are you showing me this now? Because you almost died thinking I didn't care enough to fight for you. And that's not true. I cared so much I didn't know how to let you be who you needed to be. But I'm learning. He set the ticket stub on the bedside table next to the compass. You don't owe me anything, Noah, but if you're going to recover, you need to know the truth. I never stopped showing up. Day 14 shattered the fragile peace. Paulette came in during afternoon vitals with a tight expression and a printout she set on the table without meeting Noah's eyes. This came through the patient portal. It's flagged for Dr. Chen. Noah picked it up. It was a scanned document, a hospital incident report dated 3 years ago from a different facility, St. Catherine's, 2 towns over. The report detailed a patient complaint filed by someone named Claire Donovan, alleging that Dr. Adrian Klein had maintained an inappropriate personal relationship with a patient's family member, leading to biased care decisions and delayed discharge. The report had been investigated and dismissed, but it was there, stamped and filed. At the bottom, a handwritten note in fresh ink. Ask him why he really stayed. No signature. Noah's pulse jumped to 122. Chen arrived 10 minutes later, read the document, and immediately called Adrian in. He stood in the doorway, still holding his pager, and read the report in silence. This is from my ex-wife's sister, he said finally. Claire filed it during our divorce. She was angry because I'd treated her father in the ICU and he didn't survive. She blamed me, said I was distracted by the marriage falling apart. The hospital investigated, found no evidence of negligence or misconduct, and closed the case. Why didn't you tell me? Noah's voice cracked. Because it's not relevant to your care, and it's not true. But someone sent this to you to make you doubt me. He looked at Chen. "I'll step away from the case if Miss Ferreira requests it." Noah wanted to say the word, weather check, wanted to push him away before he could hurt her again, but she looked at the compass on the windowsill, at the train ticket, at the exhaustion in his face, and instead asked, "Who sent it?" Chen checked the portal log. Submitted anonymously through a public terminal in the hospital lobby at 10:45 this morning. Someone inside the building. Someone who wanted to break whatever trust had been rebuilt. The hospital's media and ethics liaison, a stern woman named Dr. Patricia Voss, arrived on day 16 with a formal letter summoned for Adrian to attend a review meeting at 10 o'clock the following morning regarding Providence Metro media relations and personal conflict of interest policy. The letter cited concerns raised by a third party regarding potential boundary violations in patient care assignment. It didn't name Noah, but it didn't have to. The damage was done. Adrian was placed on administrative leave pending review, removed from all clinical duties effective immediately. Dr. Chen remained Noah's attending, but the team that rounded the next morning was full of strangers. Thomas called from Lisbon, furious. "Who did this?" "I don't know," Noah said, staring at the empty windowsill where Adrian had taken the compass when he left. "But whoever it is wants to make sure I don't trust him." "Do you trust him?" She didn't answer. Couldn't, because the truth was messy. She trusted his competence, his honesty about the past, his stupid brass compass, and his middle-of-the-night vigils. But trust wasn't the same as staying. She'd left once because loving him meant losing herself. What if this was just a new version of the same trap? Paulette came in with discharge paperwork. Noah was stable enough to transfer to a step-down unit, then home with outpatient pulmonary rehab. "You're going to be okay, honey," Paulette said, squeezing her hand. But as Noah signed the forms, she couldn't stop thinking about Adrian's question to himself on day 2, scribbled in the margins of her chart where he thought no one would see. How do you save someone who doesn't want to be saved? Maybe the better question was, how do you let someone save you without disappearing? Harold Baines showed up on day 18, a retired station master in his 70s with a Red Sox cap and a laminated train schedule from October 3 years ago tucked under his arm. Chen had tracked him down after the anonymous complaint, looking for corroboration. He sat in the visitor chair beside Noah's new room in the step-down unit and laid out the evidence like a grandfather showing old photographs. "This here's the schedule for October 15th. Last northbound train through Greenfield Junction stopped at 22:45. I was closing up the station, and this fella, your Dr. Klein, was sitting on the bench with a sign he'd made on a napkin. Noah, I'll wait." Misspelled wait, actually. Crossed it out and fixed it. I asked if he needed help, and he said he was meeting someone. I brought him coffee from the thermos in my office. Waited with him until near 3 in the morning when it was clear nobody was coming. Harold pulled out a small notebook, the kind conductors used to carry. I wrote it down. October 15, 23:30 hours, gentleman waiting, platform 2, coffee provided. And I keep logs for insurance mostly, but also because people forget kindness. He flipped the page. And I took a photo. I do that sometimes for folks. Thought maybe if the lady saw it someday she'd know he was serious. Noah's throat tightened. He told me. But someone sent that hospital report trying to make me think he had ulterior motives. Harold shook his head. I can't speak to hospital business, but I can tell you this. A man who sits on a cold platform for 4 hours isn't doing it for show. He's doing it because he doesn't know what else to do. Chen, standing by the door, made a note. "Mr. Baines, would you be willing to provide a written statement confirming the timeline? Already typed it up and dated, signed, and notarized at the county clerk's office yesterday. Figured you'd need it official." He handed over a single sheet, stamped with the county seal in blue ink. Middlesex County Clerk, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The notary signature was clear, dated November 18th. Everything matched. The photo, the ticket, the timeline, the witness. And suddenly, the narrative collapsed. Adrian had been there. He'd waited. The complaint was old, dismissed, weaponized by someone who wanted to poison the well. "Who sent the report?" Noah asked. Harold frowned. "Don't know, but the lady at the clerk's office mentioned someone had requested a copy of Dr. Klein's divorce decree last week. Public record, so they had to provide it. Asked a lot of questions about incident reports, too. Chen's expression hardened. I'll follow up with hospital security. The review meeting happened 3 days later in the hospital's administrative conference room, and Noah insisted on attending despite still needing supplemental oxygen and a wheelchair. Chen pushed her into the room at 9:55, and the panel, Dr. Voss, the chief medical officer, and a hospital attorney, looked up in surprise. Miss Ferreira, you're not required. I'm the patient, Noah said, voice steady despite the cannula. I'm required. Adrian sat alone on the other side of the table. No lawyer, no support, just a folder of documents. He met her eyes and she saw it. Resignation. He thought he'd already lost. Dr. Voss opened the file. Dr. Klein, you've been accused of maintaining inappropriate boundaries with a critically ill patient, specifically. Let me stop you, Noah interrupted. The accusation is false, and I have proof. She pulled out the photograph, the train ticket, Harold's notarized statement, and the county clerk's certification. 3 years ago, Dr. Klein and I separated because I couldn't reconcile my work with his fear for my safety. He tried to meet me at Greenfield Junction on October 15th to talk, waited for 4 hours, and I never showed up. The station master, Harold Baines, documented it, photographed it, and has now provided a sworn statement confirming the timeline and context. When I was admitted to this ICU 14 days ago, Dr. Klein immediately disclosed the conflict of interest and requested co-management with Dr. Chen to ensure ethical care. He followed every protocol. He stayed in the hospital during my critical period because he's a dedicated physician, not because he overstepped. She slid the documents across the table. The incident report from St. Catherine's was dismissed 3 years ago and was sent to me anonymously by someone who accessed public divorce records last week and wanted to sabotage Dr. Klein's reputation. Your hospital security logs show the submission came from a lobby terminal. I suggest you investigate who had access. The CMO reviewed the documents. The attorney made notes. Dr. Voss looked at Adrian. Who filed the original complaint at St. Catherine's? My ex-wife's sister, Claire Donovan. She was grieving her father and needed someone to blame. And do you have reason to believe she sent the report to Miss Ferreira? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. The attorney leaned forward. We'll review the security footage and the portal access logs. In the meantime, Dr. Klein, based on the evidence presented and the confirmation of protocol adherence, I'm recommending your administrative leave be lifted immediately. Dr. Voss nodded. Agreed. Dr. Klein, you're reinstated. Miss Ferreira, thank you for your clarity. The meeting adjourned. As the room emptied, Adrian stayed seated, staring at the documents. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. You showed up for me. I'm showing up for you. Noah was discharged on day 22, medically stable with a 6-week pulmonary rehab plan and strict instructions to avoid international travel until her lungs fully healed. Thomas flew back to help her settle into her apartment in Cambridge, a small place overlooking the Charles River that she'd barely lived in for the past 2 years. The brass compass sat on her desk now, a gift Adrian had insisted she keep. Find true north, he'd said at discharge, wherever that is. For 3 weeks she focused on breathing exercises, physical therapy, and rebuilding her strength. Her editor, Marcus, called weekly with assignments, safe domestic pieces that didn't require a passport. And slowly, the fog lifted. On a cold afternoon in mid-December, Noah walked into Providence Metro's main lobby carrying a small package. She asked for Dr. Klein and waited on a bench near the window. He appeared 20 minutes later, still in scrubs, surprise and caution flickering across his face. Noah, are you okay? I'm good, almost normal. Lungs at 85% capacity. She handed him the package. Inside was a second brass compass, engraved on the back, NF, for when you lose your way. Adrian turned it over, read the inscription, and smiled. Small, genuine, the first real smile she'd seen in years. I'm not asking you to wait for me, Noah said, and I'm not asking you to stop worrying. But I am asking if we can try something different, where I do my work and you do yours, and we trust each other enough to show up when it counts. No more ultimatums? No more ultimatums. Just coordinates, check-ins, proof that we're both still here. Adrian slipped the compass into his pocket. I can do that. Good, because I'm covering a climate summit in Boston next month. Local, low risk. And I'd like you to come to the opening session, if you're free. I'll be there. They walked out together into the winter air where the late sun caught the edges of the hospital's glass facade and made it look almost warm. Noah breathed deeply, still careful, still healing, but hers. She'd learned what mattered. Showing up wasn't the same as giving up. Boundaries weren't walls. They were maps. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was let someone meet you halfway and trust them to stay. Moral: real love doesn't demand you choose between who you are and who you're with. It asks you to show up honestly, set clear boundaries, and trust that the other person will meet you there. If this story gave you the courage to choose yourself without losing the ones who matter, subscribe and tell us. What would true north look like in your life?